Is Dishonored 2 a perfect sequel? It is, in theory. In practice, however, well, that's what the rest of this video is for. Dishonored 2 carries on from the final DLC of the first game. I won't be spoiling that just in case you haven't gotten around to playing it. But Delilah is back and claiming to be the sister of the late Empress, meaning that Emily, who's been ruling the Empire for the past 10 years, no longer has a claim to her throne. This coup is aided by the Duke of Sakonos, who, with the help of his mechanical clockwork soldiers, have killed all of the guards in Dunwall and allowed Delilah to claim her throne as Empress. During the coup, you get to play as either Emily or Corvo, and whichever you choose to play, the other gets turned to stone, and you knocked out and locked high in Dunwall Tower. From there, the game begins proper. You have to escape Dunwall Tower, find a way to reclaim your throne, and find a way to turn the other person back from being stone. So I said that this game, in theory, is a perfect sequel. But why is that? It takes everything from the first game and looks to improve and expand upon it. First and foremost, giving you even more ways to play. Like I mentioned earlier, you get a choice of playing as either Corvo or Emily. Emily has a completely different set of powers to Corvo, like being able to link people together so that whatever happens to one of them happens to all of them, and being able to create a doppelganger, which can cause a bit of chaos in your stead. But on top of having another set of powers to choose from, you also have the option to go completely powerless as either character, which adds yet another way to play, and it can be really hard, especially if you're wanting to go quiet and non-lethal. It's very hard then. But back to the powers for a second. In the first game, you can buy your powers and then level them up from level 1 to level 2. But Dishonored 2 takes this and goes one step further. Instead of having just a single upgrade step, you instead get upgrade paths, getting more options. Like Corvo's Blink getting Dowd's Time Stop from the DLC of the first game. But that's not all. You also get the ability to craft bone charms and runes. This ability is shared between Corvo and Emily, so whoever you choose, you can unlock crafting. And the way that it's implemented is actually really interesting. While you're out exploring the world, just like in Dishonored 1, you'll come across bone charms. You can break these bone charms down for raw whalebone, but also to take the enchantments from them to then put on other bone charms. You can put multiple abilities into new bone charms, but this comes at a risk. The more enhancements that you put onto a single bone charm, the higher the risk of it becoming corrupted. The more enhancements you put onto a single bone charm, the higher the risk of it being corrupted. And as such, having a negative enhancement to go alongside all of your positives. Like drop assassinations draining some of your health whenever you perform one, and by upgrading this ability, you can use one enhancement multiple times, meaning that the effect can stack, and you can also reduce your risk of a bone charm becoming corrupted. It's not just your character that's been improved upon from the first game. Enemies have also been hitting the gym. Helmets are much more common, meaning that that perfectly aimed crossbow bolt is now going to just plink off of a helmet more often than it would in the first game, meaning that you have to be much more careful with where you place your arrows. But aside from the guards, all of the unfriendly faces from the first game return in this one. From the captain of the guard, to the hounds, to the zealot overseers, and even Delilah's coven of witches. And let's not forget the rats. You can't have a Dishonored game without rats. There's plenty of rats to go around. But there are some new enemies that'll need to be taken out in new and different ways. First and foremost, the bloodflies, giant blood-sucking mosquitoes. They swarm around their hives, but if you stay far enough away from them and move slowly, they tend to ignore you. You can throw a body in there and they'll all dive towards it, or you can just go in sword slashing like a madman and try and cut them down before they get to you. They're generally not a massive issue. But the next of the new foes are not so easily dealt with. The clockwork soldiers of Kirin Jindosh are a pain, that's for sure. They are equal parts hard to evade and hard to deal with. They can jump up flights of a building like it was nothing, meaning that blinking to the floor above isn't always going to be a great escape if they start catching onto you. You can always try to rewire them by getting onto their leg unnoticed, but that's really hard to do, especially if you want to remain unnoticed. Alternatively, you could just shoot off the cameras located in their heads, but that then leads them to attack anyone that wanders by, meaning that this strategy isn't great when you're going for a non-lethal run. The clockwork soldiers can easily be a massive pain to deal with, especially when that's combined with where they are in the levels. They're often in places where it's difficult to be stealthy, where it feels very linear and there aren't very many places to hide. My biggest frustration with this game came from places like Jindosh's mansion. When I was going for the ghost run, these guys can see both in front of them and behind them, so getting around them meant trying something, seeing if it worked, and if it didn't, reloading to try something else. But maybe you can learn from my mistake and not do that in your run. Make sure you have a way to take off the heads, although they will then attack anyone that wanders by. Your choice. But one thing that I really did like that they added into Dishonored 2 is the stats screen. I know it sounds really boring, but just hear me out on this. In the first game, the only way to know that you've been found out is by getting to the end of the level. Well, this stat screen shows you how many times that you've been detected by enemies, meaning that if you keep tabs on this screen, you can easily go back and fix your mistake by loading a previous save, instead of having to go through the whole level, wait for it to be over, and then having to do it all over again, which I personally prefer, going back 5 minutes instead of going back to do a whole level. But the level design itself can mean that you end up reloading a save a lot more often than you'd like to, especially if you're going for some of these achievements. For some reason, the levels in Dishonored 2, to me, felt a lot more linear than the first. I just ran into situations where it felt like there was only 1 or 2 ways to go about doing something. Don't get me wrong, there are lots of paths. It just felt like it was a lot more enclosed and a lot more linear. If you find your way to the end of the game and still think that you're wanting more, well, Dishonored 2 has you covered with New Game Plus. This lets you replay the game after you escape from Dunwall Tower and meet with the Outsider. You get all of the runes that you've collected in your previous playthrough, meaning that you can start with a full array of powers and abilities to complement your new game. But that's not all. As you're selecting powers in the New Game Plus, you may notice that your list of powers has been expanded upon. You get to pick from the powers of both Corvo and Emily at the same time, meaning that you can have Corvo's ability to stop time and Emily's ability to link multiple people together and become the master assassin that you had always dreamed of becoming. So while this game does improve upon much of the first game and is still just as fun, to me, it just doesn't have the same charm. There were times when the game would be more frustrating than fun. Like, trying to get into and through small spaces was a chore in and of itself. And yes, while the graphics are improved, instead of looking like a painting come to life, something I heavily complimented the first game on, the textures in Dishonored 2 are just that. They're textures. A rock looks just like a rock. Metal looks just like metal. Which is technically an improvement, but it loses that charm of the first. Which may just be nostalgia talking, that's possible. I am fallible. It's like replacing your favorite chocolate with, like, pineapple. It's still technically edible as like a dessert, it's still sweet, and it's been improved upon in that it's healthier, but it's just not the same. But do I recommend it? Overall, yes. Dishonored 2 is still more Dishonored. It's improved upon the first game, it's still fun to play. It carries on the story from the first game in an excellent way, and is still more of what you enjoy. It just has those frustrating moments every once in a while, which kinda hold it back, but not too much. But that's it for this video. If you found it helpful or you want to see more stuff like this, well, there's a subscribe button down there, and I'm sure you know what to do with it. If you've liked this video, don't forget to like it, and until next time, did you know I'm English? Cheerio.